So I've got the 14 pieces that all make up my bench top, and they're all slightly oversized. So I bought these from Bunnings. These were 3.6 metre lengths, and I got them to cut them down into 2 metre lengths, and then the offcuts were used for the legs and other components for the workbench. As such, these are oversized. The bench will be 1.9 metres long, but I did that deliberately. If you go to any home centre and get them to cut something for you, you won't get any straight cuts. Amazingly, I have one square cut in this lot, so that's already better than I expected. So what I'm going to do now is chop off one end of all of these boards, flip it around and chop off the other end. I'm not going to cut it to final dimension, so as I said, these are 2 metres long or 2000 millimetres long. I'll cut off 5 millimetres and then flip it, cut off another 5 millimetres. That'll mean they're all roughly the same length and roughly square, which just makes it a lot easier later on. Then when it comes time to squaring up the bench, once everything's been glued, I can cut it all down with a circular saw.
The Wood Night is sponsored by I Would Like.
So all of these are now cut to the same length. They're square at both ends, but it's still a little bit oversized. We're about 8 centimetres over the desired length. So I've split these into the two slabs, as this is a split top Roubo. This would be the back slab and this would be the front slab. So this pile typically will have the better edge and the better face. Although really it's only the two outside faces, so the front and the middle faces, that need to be pretty. The back slab, not quite as pretty. A few of the pieces having knots or bark inclusions, not quite as nice, but because this is on the underside, no one's ever going to see it, and it's in the middle of the lamination anyway, so it's not going to affect the structure at all. So what I'm going to do now is joint one face and one edge, and then I will put dominoes in it, or you could use biscuits or dowels, and that's just for alignment so that it doesn't move vertically. That'll mean less work after glue up to clean up and get everything level, so we're wasting less material, end up with a thicker bench. So we're looking pretty good here, and with just the 3 clamps on, it's actually pretty much closed, and I probably could just glue it up like this. However, I've got a domino, so what I'm going to do is put a domino between each layer, or a couple, to stop the vertical movement. So if you've got a biscuit jointer or some sort of dowel machine, dowel jig, you can certainly use that instead of a biscuit. I'm not using it for strength, it's purely for making sure it doesn't move vertically. I'm not so worried about the horizontal movement, but as you clamp it with all the glue on it, it's likely to shift up and down, and I don't really care if I get some movement, but I want to reduce it as much as possible because that's just material that I'm wasting when I have to flatten it. So hopefully I can get a fairly flat top and have minimal flattening to do afterwards. So I'm going to use 6mm dominoes, purely because I've got a whole bunch of them, and again, I'm not using it for strength, it's just for alignment. So I'll probably put in 3 or 4 across the length, and I'll stagger them so that they don't sort of butt into each other on any laminations, and then I can get to gluing.
I'm using Titebond 3 here, not for its waterproofing properties, but because it has a longer open time than Titebond 1, which gives me a little bit more wriggle room. Titebond Extend would work just as well. I'm skip planing what will become the bottom side of the slabs. The top will be surfaced with a router later on, but for now a smooth underside makes joinery layout a lot easier. For those who have asked if the combo machine holds up under load, this should give you your answer. It was about 3mm narrower than the maximum capacity.
I apologise for the crappy angle, but I don't have enough room to move everything to get a better angle just at the moment. So I need to get both these two slabs to one length, because at the moment they're sort of a bit staggered as the lamination's moved a little bit left to right. And I can't do any of the joinery laying out or cutting the joinery until the two slabs are the same length. They don't necessarily have to be final length, but they do have to be the same length. So I'm going to use my track saw to do this. I've got the track clamped to the two slabs, so I'll cut 2 passes per side. I'll do about 20mm per pass, so 20 and then to full depth, flip it around, repeat the same process. This blade is starting to get a little bit dull, so it'll be a little bit friendlier on it. If you don't have a track saw, there are guides that you can make for circular saws. So if you look up a door board or circular saw track, you can certainly find those, or just clamping a straight piece of wood to reference the edge of your guide up against, edge of your saw up against, should do the trick. So I've picked an arbitrary spot and I used my square to transfer that all the way across, and I've also drawn that line on the two edges so that I can match it up when I flip the side. So I'm going to cut both sides of this edge first, then I can measure out how long I want the bench from that point. That can be my reference point, rather than sort of guessing at this stage.
After I made the initial cut, I was able to figure out how to move things around and get a better shot. So this cut is all of the second end. As I said, there are 4 cuts, 2 per side to relieve the strain on the somewhat dull blade. I then moved on to making the divider piece out of some very rough blackwood. This is what I made my outfeed table for a few weeks ago. It was so lovely to use it for the actual purpose. I partially resorted at the table saw, 2 passes on each side with a ripping blade, then over at the bandsaw all I had to do was follow the lines. This was much safer than just using the table saw and much quicker than using just the bandsaw, if you don't include the time it took me to make the outfeed table.
So for the central divider, I've marked out the areas I want to remove. So on the center of the 3 divider pieces, I'll be cutting out where it's marked in chalk. So that'll give me 5 tool holder things. It's 100mm in from each end, then a 200mm gap, and that rinses and repeats, except for the center one, which is 280mm, and that is to just make it so it's symmetrical. So this is probably the one that will get the most use because it's in the center of the bench. But because I had to chop a little bit more off the end because there was a knot that got exposed, this is probably the neatest way to do it. So what I'll do now is take this to the miter saw. That way I can keep a good grain match by cutting out the sections rather than just chopping random dividers. Not that it's all that critical, but it looks a bit prettier. And that way, should I have issues where it's maybe not strong enough or something, I can always keep these pieces and then glue them back in, maybe smaller dividers or something like that, down the track.
I know I said miter saw, but given these were smallish cuts, it was easier and safer to use the crosscut sled at the table saw. Then everything could be glued up. I put pencil lines where I was cutting before I cut everything, so it was just a matter of realigning to those lines.
With the divider gap stop tool holder thing done, we're now pretty much done with the top at the moment. So the top is cut to length, it's cut to width, and with the divider in here we actually know the entire width of the bench. So now what we can do is start working on the base, so the legs, the frame, the joinery in the top. This is the underside of the top, so the top side is still a bit rough, but that'll get flattened properly later. If you haven't seen the tool dividers, those gaps we cut in it before, glued gaps around, so that we can put things like chisels or saws when we're not using them, can just pop in there. They're on the bench, so they're not put away, they're not out of sight type thing, but they're also not all over the bench, so you can still use the bench when you're switching between tasks frequently. That's enough for this episode. On the next episode, we'll look at making the legs, the stretchers, so the long and short stretchers, as well as the joinery that attaches those together and into the workbench. Thanks for watching.